The village healer pressed 2 silver coins into Xander Irving's palm and told him the cloak could not be saved. But there was a tailor 3 miles south who worked miracles with impossible cloth, if he was willing to make the journey before nightfall. Xander looked down at the torn wool in his hands, the fabric his mother had woven before the fever took her, and he knew he would walk 100 miles if it meant preserving this last piece of her. The cloak had been slashed clean through during the skirmish at the northern pass, when he and 6 other scouts had stumbled into an orc raiding party. 2 men had died. Xander had survived with nothing but this ruined garment and memories that woke him gasping in the dark. He thanked the healer and set out immediately, following the rutted cart path that wound through harvested fields and stands of birch trees gone golden with autumn. The air smelled of wood smoke and coming rain. His boots kicked up dust that settled on his trousers, already worn thin at the knees. At 23, Xander had spent 5 years as a scout for the border settlements, and the work had left him lean and weathered, his dark hair perpetually in need of cutting, his hazel eyes wary in a way that made merchants nervous and tavern keepers watchful. The tailor's shop appeared just as the sun touched the horizon, a small timber building with a thatched roof and a painted sign that read "Alterations and Repairs" in careful script. Smoke rose from the chimney. Through the wavy glass of the front window, Xander could see lamplight and movement. He pushed open the door and a small bell chimed above his head. The interior was warm and smelled of wool and lavender. Bolts of fabric lined shelves along the walls. A work table dominated the center of the room, scattered with needles and thread in a dozen colors, scissors of various sizes, and scraps of cloth organized in neat piles. A middle-aged man with spectacles and flour-dusted hands looked up from where he was pinning the hem of a dress. "Help you?" The man asked. "I need a cloak mended," Xander said, holding up the torn wool. "The healer in Millbrook sent me, said you were the only one who might manage it." The tailor crossed the room and took the cloak, turning it over in his hands with a practiced eye. He examined the slash that ran from collar to hem, the edges frayed and uneven. He sucked his teeth thoughtfully. "That is a bad tear," he said. "I can mend it, but it will take time I do not have this evening. My daughter does most of the fine work these days, but she is out on an errand." "If you can return tomorrow afternoon, I cannot," Xander interrupted, more sharply than he intended. "I am due back at the garrison by tomorrow noon. Is there any way?" The tailor studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the cloak again. Something in his expression softened. "This was important to someone," he said quietly. "My mother made it." The man nodded slowly. "I understand, but I truly cannot help you tonight." However, he paused, seeming to weigh his words. "There is another tailor a mile further south, lives alone, keeps odd hours, might still be working. Though I should warn you, most folks from the villages do not go there." "Why not?" The tailor handed back the cloak. "Because the tailor is an orc." Xander felt his chest tighten. His hand went instinctively to his side where his knife usually hung. He had left it at the garrison, not expecting to need a weapon for a simple errand to a tailor shop. "An orc," he repeated. "I came to the area 2 years back, built a cabin and set up shop. Does good work, I will give her that. Better than mine if I am being honest, but people are afraid. You know how it is." Xander knew exactly how it was. He had fought orcs, had watched them kill his friends, had seen the aftermath of their raids on farming settlements, the burned buildings and scattered belongings, and the terrible silence that followed violence. But he looked down at his mother's cloak and thought of all the hours she had spent at her loom, her fingers moving with the same careful precision he imagined a tailor's might. He thought of her smile and her songs and the way she had held him the night his father died, promising that cloth could keep you warm when nothing else could. "How do I find this cabin?" he asked. The tailor gave him directions, though his expression suggested he thought Xander was making a mistake. Xander thanked him and stepped back into the cooling evening. The path grew narrower as he walked, less traveled. The birch trees gave way to older oaks, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked the fading light. Xander's heart beat faster with each step. He told himself he was being foolish, that a tailor was just a tailor, but his body remembered the clash of weapons and the smell of blood, and he could not quite convince himself to relax. The cabin appeared in a small clearing, exactly where the tailor had said it would be. It was well built, with a stone foundation and a sturdy door. Smoke rose from the chimney. A vegetable garden, now mostly harvested for the season, lay to one side. Chickens pecked in a small coop. Everything looked ordinary and peaceful. Xander approached the door and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate. The door opened. The orc woman who stood in the doorway was not what he expected. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a muscular build that spoke of strength carefully maintained. Her skin was a deep green like forest moss, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her ears came to slight points. She wore a simple dress of brown wool, an apron over it, and her hands were elegant despite their size, the fingers long and tapered. She looked at him with eyes the color of amber, wary but not hostile. "Yes." Her voice was lower than a human woman's, but clear and measured. Xander realized he was staring. He cleared his throat. "I was told you are a tailor," he said. "I need a cloak mended. I know it is late, but I am desperate. I can pay." The orc woman's gaze dropped to the wool in his hands, then back to his face. She was clearly evaluating him, weighing risks he could only guess at. "You are human," she said. "I am. And you came here knowing I am orc. The tailor in town told me you do good work." Her expression shifted slightly, though he could not read what the change meant. After a moment, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "Let me see what you have." Xander hesitated on the threshold. Every instinct told him this was dangerous, that crossing into an orc's home was the kind of mistake that got you killed. But he looked at her hands again, at the needle case hanging from her apron pocket, at the thread caught in the fabric of her sleeve, and he thought about his mother's patient fingers at her loom. He stepped inside. The cabin's interior was similar to the shop in town, but smaller and more personal. The work table was positioned near the window to catch the last of the daylight, though several lamps added warm illumination. Finished garments hung from pegs on the walls, everything from simple shirts to an elaborate jacket with embroidered cuffs. The furniture was oversized, built for someone of her stature, but the overall impression was one of careful order and quiet domesticity. The orc woman closed the door behind him and gestured to the work table. "Show me," she said. Xander laid the cloak across the table. She moved to stand opposite him, her hands hovering over the fabric for a moment before touching it. When she did, her fingers were gentle, tracing the tier with a delicate precision that seemed at odds with her size. "This is hand-woven," she said, more to herself than to him. "Good quality. Old. The tier is recent." "A blade," Xander said, then immediately regretted the admission. Her amber eyes flicked up to his face. "You were in a fight, a skirmish, at the northern pass." Something shifted in her expression, a tightening around her eyes. She looked back at the cloak and was silent for a long moment. "I can mend this," she said finally. "It will take several hours. The weave is complex, and I will need to match the pattern precisely or the repair will be obvious. If you want it to look like it was never torn, I will need time and concentration." How much time? 4 hours, perhaps 5. I will work through the night if necessary. You can return in the morning, or, she paused, and he saw her hesitate over her next words. Or you can wait. I have a chair by the fire, but I understand if you do not wish to stay. Xander looked at the cloak, then at her. He had no desire to walk back through the dark woods, and the idea of leaving his mother's cloak in the hands of an orc, even a tailor, made his stomach clench with unease. But staying here, alone with her through the night, felt equally dangerous. I will wait, he heard himself say. She nodded, as if she had expected nothing else. She gathered the cloak carefully and carried it to the work table, positioning a lamp to give herself the best light. Then she went to a chest in the corner and began selecting spools of thread, holding each up to the wool to check the color match. Xander moved to the chair she had indicated, a sturdy piece near the stone fireplace where a small fire burned. From here, he could see her profile as she worked, the way she bent over the fabric with complete focus. She threaded a needle, the movement so fluid and practiced that it looked effortless. Then she began to work on the torn edges of the cloak, her fingers moving with a speed and delicacy that transfixed him. Minutes passed in silence. Xander watched her hands, the way she held the needle, the precision of each stitch. He had expected an orc to be crude, brutish. Everything he had been taught said orcs were creatures of violence, incapable of subtlety or refinement. But watching her work was like watching a musician play an instrument, each movement part of a larger pattern that only she could see in its entirety. "What is your name?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from her work. "Xander Irving." "I am Kara Ashford," he blinked. "Ashford. That is a human name." "It is the name I chose," she said simply. "I was born Kara of the Broken Spear clan, but I am not part of that clan any longer. When I came here, I chose a name that would make me seem less threatening. It has not worked as well as I hoped. Why did you leave your clan?" Her hands paused for just a moment, then resumed their work. "That is a long story, and not one I share with strangers who might be carrying weapons." "I have no weapon," Xander said. "I left my knife at the garrison." "I know. I checked your belt when you came in." She glanced at him briefly, a hint of something that might have been amusement in her eyes. But a man who has been in a skirmish at the northern pass is a weapon himself, knife or no knife. "The skirmish was against orcs," Xander said, and immediately regretted his bluntness. Kara's expression did not change. "I assumed as much. There have been raids. You know about the raids. I hear things. And I understand why you might look at me and see an enemy." She set down her needle and met his gaze directly. "I am not your enemy, Xander Irving. I left the clans because I could not stomach their ways any longer. I do not raid. I do not fight. I sew and I mend and I live alone because it is the only way I can live with myself." Her honesty caught him off guard. He had expected denial or deflection, not this raw directness. "Why did you let me in?" he asked. "You knew I had fought orcs. I could be here to hurt you." "You could," she agreed. "But you came here desperate to save a cloak your mother made. A man who cares that much about preserving his mother's work is not the kind who would kill a woman in her own home." "At least, that is what I hoped. You took a risk." "I take a risk every day," Kara said quietly. "Living here, being what I am, every human who walks through that door could be the one who decides I have no right to exist in peace." She picked up her needle again. "But I will not let fear turn me into the monster they think I am. I will sew. I will mend. I will do small kindnesses where I can. And perhaps one day people will see me for what I am, not what they expect me to be." Xander sat back in his chair, unsettled by the conviction in her words. He thought of the orcs he had fought, the way they had screamed and charged with weapons raised. He thought of the villages burned and the people killed. And then he looked at Kara, bent over his mother's cloak, her needle moving with patient care through fabric that meant nothing to her except that it mattered to him. "I am sorry," he said, surprising himself, "for assuming." She looked up, and her expression softened in a way that made her seem younger, more vulnerable. "Thank you," she said simply. They lapsed back into silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, less tense. Xander watched her work and found himself noticing details he had missed before. The way her brow furrowed slightly when she encountered a particularly difficult section of the weave. The care she took to align each stitch perfectly. The small nod of satisfaction when she completed a section. "How did you learn to do this?" he asked after a while. "My mother taught me," Kara said. "Among the orcs, sewing is not considered women's work or men's work, just necessary work. Everyone learns the basics, but I had a talent for it and I enjoyed the precision. It was something I could control in a life that felt very out of control." "What do you mean?" She was quiet for a long moment, her needle continuing its steady rhythm. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. "I was born during a time of war between the clans. My father was killed in a raid when I was young. My mother remarried to a warrior who believed strength was the only virtue that mattered. He did not understand why I preferred sewing to fighting. He thought I was weak." She paused, her jaw tightening. "He tried to make me strong his way. It did not work. Eventually, I left." "That must have been difficult." "It was the hardest thing I have ever done," Kara admitted. "Leaving the clan means exile. My mother could not come with me. I have not seen her since." Xander heard the grief in her voice and recognized it. He knew what it was like to lose a mother, to carry that absence like a weight in your chest. "I am sorry," he said again. Kara shook her head. "It was my choice. I do not regret it even when I am lonely. This life where I can create instead of destroy is worth the cost." She returned her full attention to the cloak, and Xander watched in growing fascination as the tear slowly disappeared under her skilled hands. She was not just mending the fabric. She was recreating the weave itself, each thread positioned to match the original pattern so perfectly that he could barely see where the damage had been. An hour passed, then another. The fire burned low and Kara paused to add more wood, her movements efficient and practiced. She offered Xander water and a piece of bread with cheese, which he accepted gratefully. They ate in companionable silence, and he found himself relaxing in a way he had not expected. "You are good at this," he said, gesturing to the cloak. "Thank you. It is the one thing I am good at." "I doubt that is true." She glanced at him, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "You are kind to say so. I am not being kind, I am being honest." Xander leaned forward slightly. "You built this cabin yourself." "I did. And the garden." "Mine as well." "Then you are good at least 3 things, probably more." Kara's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile, though it faded quickly. She looked back at the cloak, but he saw the way her shoulders had relaxed slightly, as if some tension had eased. They talked more as the night deepened. Small things at first, cautious exchanges of information that revealed little. But gradually, as the hours passed and the cloak took shape under Kara's hands, their conversation grew more personal. Xander found himself telling her about his mother, about the songs she used to sing and the stories she told. Kara spoke of her own mother, of the traditional orc tales about brave warriors and clever tricksters, about honor and sacrifice. "Your people value honor?" Xander asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. Kara's hand stilled. When she looked at him, her expression was grave. "We do. But honor means different things to different people. For some, it means strength in battle. For others, it means protecting the clan at any cost, even if that cost is the lives of those outside the clan." She set down her needle. I believed honor meant treating everyone with dignity, regardless of whether they were orc or human or anything else. My stepfather disagreed. Many in the clan disagreed. So I left, because I could not be part of something that called cruelty honorable. Xander felt something shift in his chest, a reorientation of his understanding. He had spent 5 years thinking of orcs as a unified enemy, a single threat to be guarded against. It had not occurred to him that they might disagree among themselves, that they might struggle with the same questions of right and wrong that humans did. That must have been lonely, he said quietly. Yes, Kara agreed, but so is staying in a place that asks you to be someone you are not. They looked at each other across the work table, and Xander felt the weight of recognition. He thought of his own life, of the expectations placed on him as a scout, the pressure to be hard and unforgiving. He thought of the nights he lay awake wondering if there was more to life than patrols and skirmishes and waiting for the next attack. Kara broke eye contact first, returning to her work. But something had changed between them. Some invisible barrier had thinned. "Tell me about the cloak," she said after a while. "What was your mother like?" So Xander told her. He spoke of his mother's laugh and her terrible cooking, and the way she had never quite given up hope that he would settle down and become a farmer instead of a scout. He told her about the last time he had seen her, how she had wrapped this cloak around his shoulders and made him promise to stay safe. He told her about getting the message 3 weeks later that the fever had taken her, and how he had not been there to say goodbye. Kara listened with her full attention, her hands never stopping their work. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "She loved you very much," Kara said finally. "That is clear in every thread of this weaving. This is not just a cloak. It is a protection, a prayer in cloth form." Xander felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." "I will make sure it is mended properly," Kara said, and there was a fierce conviction in her voice. "I will make sure her work is preserved." He believed her. The night deepened into the small hours of morning. Xander dozed in the chair by the fire, waking occasionally to find Kara still bent over the cloak, her concentration absolute. Each time he woke, the tear was smaller, less visible. He began to believe she would actually manage to make it disappear entirely. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the windows, Kara set down her needle and stood, stretching her back with a soft groan. "It is finished," she said. Xander stood and crossed to the work table. Kara held up the cloak, letting it unfold to its full length. He stared at it in disbelief. The tear was gone, completely gone. He could see a faint line if he looked very closely, but only because he knew where the damage had been. The pattern of the weave was perfect, seamless. It looked exactly as it had when his mother had finished it, whole and unblemished. "This is incredible," he breathed. "I am glad you are pleased." Kara folded the cloak carefully and handed it to him. "Your mother was a skilled weaver. It was an honor to work with her cloth." Xander took the cloak, running his fingers over the mended section. He looked up at Kara, at the tired satisfaction in her eyes, at the small smile that curved her lips. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. "The healer gave you 2 silver coins." "Yes." "Then that is the price." "It is not enough," Xander said firmly. "You worked through the entire night. This is worth far more." Kara shook her head. "You came to me when you were desperate. You trusted me enough to enter my home, to wait through the night while I worked. You spoke to me as a person, not as a monster. That is worth more than silver." Xander wanted to argue, but he saw the resolution in her face and knew it would be pointless. Instead, he placed the 2 silver coins on the work table, then added 2 more from his own purse. "For the quality of the work," he said when she opened her mouth to protest. "You said yourself you matched the weave perfectly. That deserves proper payment." Kara looked at the coins, then at him. After a moment she nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. Xander pulled on the cloak, settling it around his shoulders. It felt like his mother's embrace, warm and safe. He looked at Kara and found himself reluctant to leave. "I should go," he said. "I need to reach the garrison by noon, of course." They walked to the door together. Xander paused on the threshold, looking back at her. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for the cloak and for—" He struggled to find the right words, "for helping me see." Kara's expression softened. "You are welcome, Xander Irving. Travel safely." He stepped out into the cool morning air. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He took a few steps down the path, then turned back. Kara was still standing in the doorway, watching him. "Can I come back?" he asked. "To visit?" She looked surprised, then wary, then something like hopeful. "If you wish," she said carefully, "I do." "Then yes, you may come back." Xander smiled, and after a moment, Kara smiled back. It transformed her face, made her look younger and less burdened. He lifted a hand in farewell, and she returned the gesture. Then he turned and set off through the forest, his mother's cloak warm around his shoulders and his mind full of amber eyes and gentle hands that could make torn things whole. The journey back to the garrison took 3 hours, and Xander arrived with time to spare. He reported to his commander, submitted his patrol notes, and tried to focus on his duties. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the cabin in the clearing, to the orc woman who sewed by lamplight and spoke of honor and loneliness. Over the next week, Xander found excuses to return. First, he brought a shirt that needed a button replaced, though he could have done the work himself. Then a torn blanket. Then a jacket that he claimed needed adjusting, though it fit perfectly well. Each time, Kara greeted him with growing warmth, less surprised and more pleased to see him. They talked while she worked, their conversations ranging from the trivial to the profound. He learned that she loved the smell of rain, that she had a talent for growing herbs, that she had once dreamed of becoming a healer before her stepfather had discouraged anything he saw as weakness. She learned that Xander had wanted to be a scholar, that he could read and write better than most soldiers, that he had joined the scouts not out of love for fighting, but because it was the only way to earn steady pay after his father died and left his mother in debt. "So we are both living lives we did not choose," Kara said one afternoon, mending the blanket he had brought. "I suppose we are," Xander agreed, "though I am beginning to think the life I am living now might be better than the one I imagined." She looked at him curiously. "How so?" "I would never have met you if I had become a scholar." Kara's hand stilled. A faint green flush darkened her cheeks, and Xander realized with a start that she was blushing. "That is a kind thing to say," she said softly. "It is a true thing." They looked at each other, and the air between them felt charged with something Xander could not quite name. Then Kara looked away, focusing intently on the blanket in her hands. "Your garrison," she said, changing the subject. "Do they know you come here?" "No," Xander admitted. "They would not understand. They would think you were a traitor, probably. And yet you keep coming back." "Yes." "Why?" Xander considered the question carefully. He thought about the peace he felt in her cabin, the way their conversations made him think differently about the world. He thought about the grace of her hands and the strength in her convictions, and the way she smiled when he made her laugh. "Because you are the most interesting person I have ever met," he said finally. "Because talking to you makes me feel more like myself than I have in years. Because—" He hesitated, then committed to honesty. "Because I find myself thinking about you even when I am not here, and that matters to me." Kara set down the blanket. Her amber eyes were wide, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. "Xander," she said, and there was a warning in her voice. "You know this cannot go anywhere. You are human, I am orc. Your people hate my kind. My former clan would kill us both if they knew we were even talking. I know. Then why are you here?" Because some things are worth the risk, he said quietly. She stood abruptly, turning away from him. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. "You should not say things like that," she said. "Why not?" "Because it makes me hope, and hope is dangerous." Xander rose and crossed to stand behind her, not touching but close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Hope is all we have," he said. "Without it, what is the point of any of this?" Kara turned to face him. They were standing very close now, and he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes, could count each freckle that dotted her green skin. "If we do this," she said slowly, "if we acknowledge what is happening between us, everything will change. You could lose your position. I could lose my home. We could both lose our lives. I know. And you are still willing." Xander thought of all the things he had been taught about orcs, all the fear and hatred he had absorbed without question. He thought of the skirmish at the northern pass and the friends he had lost. And then he thought of Kara's gentle hands mending his mother's cloak, of her courage in leaving everything she knew to live according to her own convictions, of the way she looked at him like he mattered. "Yes," he said, "I am still willing." Kara reached up slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he did not, she placed her hand against his cheek. Her palm was warm and slightly rough with calluses. He leaned into the touch, his eyes closing briefly. "Then we will be careful," she said. "We will be smart. But yes, Xander Irving, yes to this, whatever this becomes." He opened his eyes and smiled at her. She smiled back, and the world felt full of possibility. They were careful. Xander varied the times he visited, never establishing a pattern that might be noticed. He told no one at the garrison where he went on his days off. Kara kept watch, alert for any sign that her presence had been discovered by hostile forces, human or orc. But within the walls of her cabin, they allowed themselves to simply be. Xander brought her books from the garrison library. Stories and histories she devoured hungrily. Kara taught him the basics of sewing, laughing at his clumsy first attempts, but praising him when he finally managed a straight line of stitches. They cooked together, combining human and orc recipes into strange new dishes that sometimes worked and sometimes failed spectacularly. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. And slowly, cautiously, they grew closer. A brush of hands when passing a thread, sitting nearer together by the fire. The day Kara rested her head on his shoulder and Xander wrapped his arm around her waist, both of them silent and content. 3 months passed this way, the autumn deepening into winter. Snow began to fall, dusting the forest in white. Xander worried about Kara in her cabin, alone when the storms came, but she assured him she was well prepared with firewood and preserved food. Still, he came as often as he could, sometimes staying overnight when the weather made travel dangerous. They navigated this new intimacy with care, both aware of the significance of each step forward. The first time Kara kissed him, soft and tentative, Xander felt like the world had shifted on its axis. The first time they fell asleep together, her back against his chest and his arms around her, he knew he had never felt safer. But the outside world did not forget them, no matter how much they might have wished it would. It was a bitter afternoon in late winter when the trouble started. Xander was at the garrison preparing for a patrol when he overheard 2 soldiers talking in low voices. "I am telling you, I saw smoke from that area," one was saying. "Could be bandits, could be orcs." "That is south of town," the other replied. "Nothing there but empty woods." "That is what I thought too. But Marcus from Millbrook said there have been rumors about something living out there. Said his wife went to a tailor once who mentioned another tailor in the woods, though she would not say much more." Xander's blood went cold. He forced himself to continue packing his supplies to appear unconcerned. "Even if there is someone out there, what does it matter?" the second soldier said. "We have enough to worry about with the raids." "True enough. Still, might be worth investigating. Captain has been talking about expanding patrols to the south." Xander finished his preparations and reported for patrol, but his mind was racing. If the garrison started patrolling near Kara's cabin, someone would eventually find her. And when they discovered an orc living alone so close to human settlements, they would not ask questions first. He needed to warn her. The patrol lasted 3 days, 3 agonizing days during which Xander could do nothing but follow orders and pretend everything was normal. When they finally returned to the garrison, he immediately requested leave time, claiming family business in a neighboring village. His commander granted the request without suspicion. Xander packed a small bag and set out at first light, his heart pounding with urgency. When he reached Kara's cabin, he found her in the garden harvesting winter vegetables. She looked up at his approach and smiled, but the smile faded when she saw his expression. "What is wrong?" she asked, setting down her basket. "The garrison is expanding patrols south," Xander said without preamble. "They have heard rumors of someone living in these woods. It is only a matter of time before they find you." Kara went very still. "How much time?" "I do not know. Weeks, perhaps, maybe less." She nodded slowly, her face settling into a careful mask that hid whatever she was feeling. She turned and walked into the cabin. Xander followed, closing the door behind them. "What will you do?" he asked. Kara stood in the center of her home, looking around at the space she had created. At the work table where she had mended his mother's cloak, at the shelves full of fabric and thread, at the comfortable chair by the fire where they had spent so many evenings talking. "I will leave," she said quietly. "I will go deeper into the wilderness, find a place even more remote. I have done it before, I can do it again." "No," Xander said. She looked at him in surprise. "No, come with me." "Xander, that is impossible." "It is not. I will request a transfer to one of the eastern outposts. They are always looking for experienced scouts. We can go together, start fresh somewhere no one knows us." "And how will you explain traveling with an orc?" "I will not have to explain anything if we are careful. We can travel separately, meet at designated points. Once we reach the eastern territories, we can say you are a refugee, that you are fleeing the clan wars." "It is even true." Kara shook her head. "You are asking me to let you abandon your entire life, your position, your home, everything you have built." "I am asking you to let me choose my own future," Xander countered. "I am tired of living a half-life pretending to be someone I am not. I want to be with you, Kara, properly, openly. And if that means going somewhere new, then that is what I will do. You might regret it. When the newness fades and you realize what you have given up." "I will not regret it," Xander said fiercely. He crossed to her and took her hands in his. "You are not some passing fancy. You are the person I want to build a life with. The person I want to wake up next to every morning. The person I want to tell about my day and hear about hers. You are it for me, Kara. So please let me do this. Let me choose you." Tears gathered in her eyes and she blinked them back with visible effort. "You are certain?" she asked, her voice rough with emotion. "I have never been more certain of anything." Kara pulled him into an embrace, her arms strong around him. He held her just as tightly, breathing in the scent of her skin and feeling the steady beat of her heart. "Then yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, let us go east. Let us find a place where we can simply be." They spent the next week preparing. Xander put in his transfer request, citing a desire for new challenges and a change of scenery. His commander was disappointed to lose an experienced scout, but agreed to forward the request. Meanwhile, Kara carefully packed her most essential tools, her best fabrics and threads, the things she would need to start fresh. She sold her chickens to a farmer who asked no questions, harvested the last of her garden, and closed up the cabin that had been her sanctuary. On the day they left, Xander came in the early morning. He helped Kara load her supplies onto the small cart she had built, covering everything with canvas to protect it from the weather. They stood together in front of the cabin for a long moment, Kara's hand in his. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. "I am," she said. Then, more softly, "I am sad to leave, but I am happy about where we are going." "Me too." They set out separately, as planned. Xander took the main roads, his travel documents marking him as a scout in good standing heading to a new assignment. Kara took the forest paths, traveling at night when possible, her cart covered and her movements careful. They met at designated points every few days, camping together in secluded spots where they could light a small fire and share a meal. During these brief reunions, they talked about their hopes for the future, imagining the life they would build together. "I will set up a proper tailor shop," Kara said one night, lying beside him under the stars. "I will make beautiful things, useful things. And you?" "I will scout at first to establish us in the community, but eventually I would like to do something else. Maybe work with maps or teach, something that does not involve as much violence." "I would like that for you," Kara said. She turned her head to look at him. "You have a gentle heart, Xander. It should not be hardened by constant fighting." He kissed her forehead. "And you have a brave heart. It should be celebrated, not hidden." The journey took nearly a month. They traveled through the last of winter and into early spring, watching the snow melt and the first green shoots push through the earth. The eastern territories were less populated than the lands they had left behind, the settlements smaller and more isolated. Xander reported to his new garrison, a rough fort built to protect a cluster of farming villages from mountain raiders. The commander was a pragmatic woman in her 50s who cared more about results than protocol. She welcomed Xander and asked only that he prove himself capable. He did, taking on patrol duties immediately and demonstrating the skills that had kept him alive for 5 years on the border. Within 2 weeks, he was a respected member of the garrison, trusted and valued. Meanwhile, Kara found a small abandoned building on the edge of the nearest village, a former storage shed that had been empty for years. With the owner's permission and a modest rent, she began converting it into a tailor shop. She worked from dawn to dusk, cleaning and repairing, building shelves and a new work table, hanging her sign outside the door. When she opened for business, the villagers were wary. They saw her green skin and her tusks and kept their distance. But Kara was patient. She did small jobs for cheap prices, proving her skill. She was polite and professional, never giving anyone a reason to fear her. Slowly, gradually, people began to come around. A farmer's wife brought a torn dress and left with it perfectly mended. A merchant commissioned a new jacket and was so pleased with the result that he recommended Kara to his associates. A mother came in with her young son's pants, the knees worn through, and left with the garment looking nearly new. Word spread. The orc tailor was strange, yes, but she did excellent work and charged fair prices. And she was quiet, kept to herself, caused no trouble. Xander visited her openly, though they were careful about appearing too close in public. He commissioned work, paid for repairs, acted the part of a satisfied customer. In private, they were building a life together. 3 months after their arrival, Xander found a small house for sale on the outskirts of the village. It was run down and would need work, but it had good bones and enough land for a garden. He bought it with his savings and Kara's earnings combined. They spent the spring and summer renovating, working side by side to replace the roof, repair the walls, build new furniture. Xander learned basic carpentry, and Kara proved to have a good eye for design. Slowly, the house became a home. They were discreet about living together, maintaining the fiction that they were simply neighbors who happened to help each other out. But everyone in the village knew the truth. They saw the way Xander and Kara looked at each other, the easy intimacy of their interactions. Some disapproved. There were muttered comments, suspicious glances, the occasional insult. But most people were willing to live and let live, especially as Kara continued to prove herself a valuable member of the community, and Xander distinguished himself as a capable scout. The garrison commander called Xander into her office one afternoon in late summer. "I am hearing things," she said without preamble. Xander's stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "That you are involved with the orc Tailor. There was no point in lying." "I am." The commander studied him for a long moment. "She came here as a refugee from the clan wars." "Yes." "And you care for her?" "I do. Very much." The commander leaned back in her chair. "I am going to tell you something, Irving. I do not care what you do in your personal life as long as it does not interfere with your duties. You have been an exemplary scout since you arrived. You have saved lives, protected the villages, done everything I have asked and more. If being with the orc woman makes you happy, then that is your business, not mine." Xander felt a wave of relief so intense he had to sit down. "Thank you, Commander. Do not thank me yet. I am also going to tell you that not everyone will feel the way I do. There are people, both human and orc, who will see your relationship as a betrayal. You need to be prepared for that. You need to be smart and careful because there are consequences if you are not." "I understand." "Good." She waved a hand in dismissal. "Now get out of here. You have patrol in an hour." Xander left the office feeling lighter than he had in months. He went to Kara's shop and found her fitting a dress for a customer. He waited until the woman left, then swept Kara into his arms and spun her around. "What has gotten into you?" she asked, laughing. "The commander knows about us. She does not care. She said as long as I do my job, my personal life is my own." Kara's eyes widened. "Truly, truly." She kissed him long and deep, and when they broke apart both of them were smiling. "Then perhaps," she said slowly, "we do not need to be quite so careful anymore." "Perhaps not," Xander agreed. That evening they walked through the village together, hand in hand for the first time. People stared, some whispered. But Xander and Kara held their heads high, refusing to be ashamed of what they had found together. When they reached their home, the small house they had rebuilt with their own hands, Kara turned to Xander. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Tell me." "When I left the Broken Spear clan, I thought I was choosing loneliness. I thought living according to my own convictions meant living alone. But you showed me that was not true. You showed me that it is possible to be yourself and still find someone who loves you for it. And I am grateful for that. I am grateful for you." Xander cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. "I am grateful for you too," he said. "You taught me to question everything I thought I knew. You taught me that courage is not just about fighting, it is about choosing to be kind when the world tells you to be hard. You made me better, Kara, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," she said softly, "because you see me. Not the orc, not the tailor, not the exile. You see Kara and you love her anyway." "I love her because of who she is, not in spite of it," Xander corrected. They kissed again, tender and slow, and then went inside their home together. The months that followed were not without challenges. There were occasional incidents, humans who saw Kara as a threat, orcs from the mountain clans who viewed her as a traitor. But Xander and Kara faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening with every obstacle overcome. Xander's reputation as a scout continued to grow. He was promoted to lead a patrol unit, given responsibilities that recognized his experience and skill. He used his position to advocate for better communication with the local orc clans, arguing that not all orcs were enemies and that cooperation was possible if both sides were willing to try. Some thought he was naive. Others saw the wisdom in his words. Slowly, tentatively, bridges began to be built. Kara's tailor shop thrived. She took on an apprentice, a young human girl whose family had fallen on hard times. Kara taught her with patience and kindness, and the girl flourished under her instruction. Seeing a human learning from an orc challenged people's assumptions, opened minds that had been closed. 1 year after their arrival in the Eastern Territories, Xander came home to find Kara standing in the garden, looking out at the mountains in the distance. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and she leaned back against him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," she said. "About how much has changed, and about how I want to make this official." Xander turned her to face him. "What do you mean?" Kara reached into her apron pocket and pulled out 2 rings, simple bands she had clearly made herself. "I mean," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, "that I want to marry you, Xander Irving. I want to stand before our community and declare that you are my partner, my love, my choice. Will you do the same?" Xander's throat tightened with joy. "Yes. God's yes." She slipped 1 ring onto his finger, and he took the other and placed it on hers. Then they held each other, both laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by the simple rightness of the moment. They married a month later, in a small ceremony in front of their home. The garrison commander attended, along with a handful of Xander's fellow scouts. Several villagers came as well, including Kara's young apprentice and the families she had sewn for. Even the local magistrate was there, willing to officially recognize the union despite its unusual nature. It was not a large gathering, but it was genuine. The people present were there because they cared, because they had come to see Xander and Kara not as human and orc, but as 2 people who loved each other. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to support each other through whatever came, to choose each other every day, to build a life rooted in mutual respect and affection. When the magistrate pronounced them married, the small crowd cheered. That night, as they lay in bed together, Xander traced patterns on Kara's shoulder. "You remember the night we met?" he asked. "When I came to your cabin with my mother's cloak?" "I remember every moment of that night," Kara said. "I was so afraid. I thought you might be there to hurt me. But then you looked at me like I was a person, not a monster, and I dared to hope. I am glad you took that risk. I am glad I took that risk. So am I." She turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Thank you for seeing me, Xander, for choosing me." "Thank you for teaching me how to see," he replied. "And for letting me love you." They kissed, a gentle affirmation of everything they had survived and everything they had become together. The years that followed were good ones. They were not without difficulty, but Xander and Kara faced each challenge as partners, drawing strength from their commitment to each other. Xander eventually left the garrison to work as a cartographer, creating detailed maps of the Eastern Territories that helped both trade and diplomacy. His work brought him into contact with various communities, orc and human, and he used every opportunity to foster understanding and cooperation. Kara's tailor shop became a fixture of the village. She expanded it, hiring 2 more apprentices and taking on increasingly complex commissions. She became known not just for her skill, but for her fairness and her willingness to teach anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of their background. They built a life that was simple but fulfilling, rooted in work they found meaningful and a love that sustained them through good times and bad. They grew a garden together every spring, cooked meals together every evening, spent countless hours talking by the fire. 5 years after their marriage, Kara came to Xander with news. They were going to have a child. The pregnancy was difficult, complicated by the differences between human and orc physiology. But Kara was strong and Xander was devoted, and when their daughter was born in the early hours of a spring morning, both parents wept with joy. They named her Alina, and she was perfect. She had her mother's green skin and pointed ears, her father's hazel eyes and dark hair. She was a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear. Raising Alina was both a joy and a challenge. They navigated questions about her heritage, about what it meant to be half human and half orc in a world that often insisted on clear divisions. But they taught her to be proud of both sides of herself, to see her mixed heritage as a strength rather than a weakness. Alina grew up surrounded by love and acceptance. She learned to sew from her mother and to read maps from her father. She learned orc stories and human songs, how to tend a garden and how to negotiate with stubborn customers at the tailor shop. She was bright and curious, with a fierce sense of justice that reminded Xander of Kara. And she was kind, with a gentleness that reminded Kara of Xander. They watched her grow with pride and wonder, marveling at the person she was becoming. On Alina's 10th birthday, Xander pulled out his mother's cloak, the one Kara had mended all those years ago. It was still in perfect condition, the repair invisible unless you knew where to look. "This was your grandmother's," he told Alina. "She made it with her own hands and your mother mended it when it was torn. It is yours now, a link to both sides of your family." Alina wrapped the cloak around her shoulders, her eyes wide with awe. "It is beautiful." "You are beautiful," Kara said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Inside and out. Never forget that." That night, after Alina had gone to bed, Xander and Kara sat together on the porch of their home, looking out at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Kara asked quietly. "Leaving your old life, coming here, choosing me?" Xander took her hand, running his thumb over the ring she still wore after all these years. "Not once," he said. "You gave me a life I could not have imagined, Kara. You gave me love and purpose and a family. You gave me the courage to be who I really am, not who I was told I should be." "How could I regret any of that?" "I feel the same," Kara said. "Before you, I was just surviving. You taught me how to truly live." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, their lives woven together as intricately as the threads in a piece of well-made cloth. Years continued to pass, marked by small joys and everyday miracles. Alina grew into a remarkable young woman, eventually becoming a mediator who worked to build peace between human and orc communities. She married a kind young man, human, who loved her for exactly who she was, and gave Xander and Kara 3 grandchildren who called them Oma and Opa, and filled their home with laughter. Xander's maps became essential tools for traders and diplomats throughout the Eastern Territories. He was consulted by leaders seeking to understand the complex geography of the region, and he used his influence to advocate for policies that protected both human and orc communities. Kara's tailor shop became a training ground for young people from across the territories, a place where humans and orcs worked side by side, learning from each other. She developed innovative techniques that blended human and orc approaches to sewing, creating a new style that was uniquely her own. Together, they became quiet pillars of their community, respected for their skills and their integrity. They were living proof that love could transcend boundaries, that different peoples could not only coexist but thrive together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the village held a celebration in their honor. There were speeches and gifts, music and dancing. People from across the territories came to pay their respects, to thank them for the example they had set. During the celebration, the garrison commander, now retired but still influential, raised a toast. 20 years ago, she said, a young scout came to me with a simple request for a transfer. I had no idea then that this man and the orc woman he loved would change so many lives, would challenge so many of our assumptions about who we could be and what we could build together. But they did, and our world is better for it. To Xander and Kara Irving, may you have 20 more years of happiness together and 20 more beyond that. Everyone raised their glasses, and Xander and Kara stood together, their hands clasped, their faces reflecting the love and gratitude they felt. Later that night, as they walked home through the quiet village, Kara stopped suddenly. "What is it?" Xander asked. She was looking at their house, the home they had built together, the light glowing warm in the windows. "I was just thinking," she said, "about the night you came to my cabin with a torn cloak. I never imagined that one small act of kindness, one night of work would lead to all of this, to a life, a family, a legacy." "I think that is the magic of it," Xander said. "We did not know where we were going. We just knew we wanted to go there together. And we did. We did." They continued walking, and when they reached their home, they stood on the porch for a moment, looking out at the life they had created. "Thank you," Kara said softly. "For what?" "For watching my hands work that first night, for staying, for choosing to see me instead of your expectations, for building this with me." Xander pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "Thank you for letting me stay," he replied, "for mending more than just a cloak, for teaching me what love really means." They went inside together, closing the door on the night and opening their arms to each other, still devoted after 20 years, still discovering new depths to their connection, still grateful for the torn cloak and the gentle hands and the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and Xander and Kara grew older together, their hair silvering, their faces creasing with the marks of years well lived. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that warmed them through every winter and celebrated every spring. They had faced prejudice and overcome it. They had built bridges where others saw only divides. They had raised a daughter who carried their values forward into a new generation. They had loved each other faithfully, tenderly, completely. And it all began with a desperate man seeking help for a torn cloak, and a lonely woman brave enough to open her door to a stranger. It began with gentle hands working through the night, with amber eyes meeting Hazel across a work table, with two people choosing to see each other's humanity, despite everything that told them they were enemies. It began with one small act of trust, and it grew into a lifetime of devotion. On the morning of their 30th anniversary, Xander woke early and found Kara already up, sitting at her work table in the corner of their bedroom. She was working on something small, her needle moving with the same precise grace it always had. "What are you making?" he asked, coming to stand behind her. She held up two handkerchiefs, beautifully embroidered with a pattern that combined human and orc designs. "For our grandchildren," she said, "so they remember where they come from and what is possible when people choose love." Xander kissed the top of her head. "They will remember because they have you as a grandmother, because they see every day what it looks like to live with courage and conviction." "We did it together," Kara said, reaching up to take his hand. "Everything good in my life I did with you. And everything good in mine I did with you," Xander agreed. They sat together in the morning light, her hand in his, 30 years of shared life behind them and whatever time remained stretching ahead. They had chosen each other when the world said they should not, had built something beautiful when others said it was impossible, had loved when fear would have been easier, and they had no regrets. The story of how they met became a tale told in the village and beyond, a reminder that sometimes the most important choices are made in moments of desperation, when we reach out for help and someone unexpected answers. That sometimes the most transformative relationships begin with simple acts of kindness, with gentle hands working to mend what is broken. Xander kept his mother's cloak, the one Kara had repaired so perfectly all those years ago. He wore it on special occasions, and eventually he passed it down to Alina, who wore it on her wedding day. And someday, Alina would pass it to her own children, along with the story of how a slight tailor mended a torn cloak, and a fierce orc stayed to watch his gentle hands work, and how that single night changed everything. It was a story about seeing past fear to find hope, about choosing love when hate would have been easier, about building bridges instead of walls. It was a story about two people who refused to be defined by others' expectations, who carved out their own path and walked it together, hand in hand. And it was a story that ended not with tragedy or loss, but with joy and fulfillment, with a life well lived and a love well deserved. Because sometimes, against all odds, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we can love are wrong. Sometimes, the most beautiful futures are the ones we build with people we were told to fear. Xander and Kara knew this truth in their bones, had lived it every day of their marriage. And when they were old and gray, sitting together on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the garden they had planted together so many years before, they looked at each other and smiled, knowing they had been blessed beyond measure. They had found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light. They had loved fiercely and gently, passionately and patiently. They had been each other's home, each other's safe harbor, each other's greatest adventure. And it all began with a torn cloak, gentle hands, and the courage to stay when leaving would have been safer. It began with a choice to trust, and it became a lifetime of devotion that changed not just two lives but an entire community, rippling outward in ways they could never have anticipated. That was the magic of love, Xander thought, holding Kara's hand as the sun set over their garden. It started small with a single moment of connection and grew into something vast and enduring. It mended what was torn, healed what was wounded, built what seemed impossible. And if two people could find that kind of love despite everything that stood against them, then perhaps there was hope for everyone. Perhaps the world could be transformed, one gentle moment at a time, one choice to see rather than judge, one hand extended in friendship rather than raised in anger. Xander and Kara had lived this truth, and they left it as their legacy to their children and grandchildren, and to everyone whose life they touched. They proved that love was not just an emotion but an action, a daily choice to honor and cherish and support another person, regardless of what the world might say. And their story, the story of the slight tailor who mended a torn cloak and the fierce human who stayed to watch her gentle hands work, became a testament to the power of that choice, to the beauty that can emerge when we dare to love across divides, to build together instead of fighting apart. It was a story with a happy ending, the kind of ending both Xander and Kara had once thought impossible for people like them. But they had created it together, stitch by careful stitch, day by patient day, year by faithful year. They had built a life that honored both of their heritages, that celebrated their differences while finding strength in their common humanity. And when they were very old, and their time together in this world grew short, they faced that final journey with the same courage and devotion they had brought to every challenge. They held each other close and whispered promises about meeting again, somewhere beyond this life, where there were no divides between orc and human, only souls who had loved well and lived fully. But those days were still far ahead as they sat together in the evening light, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had nurtured across 3 decades. They were content, fulfilled, grateful for every moment they had been given and every choice that had brought them to this place. Xander looked at Kara, at the green skin now marked with age, at the amber eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth, at the gentle hands that had mended so much more than cloth over the years. And he felt a surge of love so profound it took his breath away. "I love you," he said, simple words that contained worlds of meaning. "I love you," Kara replied, her voice soft and certain. "Always and forever." They sat together as the stars emerged, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. And their story, born from a torn cloak and gentle hands and the courage to stay, would live on long after them. A reminder that love, true love, can bridge any divide and transform any life willing to embrace it.